All right. We're in lesson 21 in Robert's grammar book. Now, last week, or the last lesson, I should say, I think we spent 3 weeks on it. That's all right. We were looking at the first aorist tense. The only difference in them is the structure of how they're conjugated. The first aorist is a weak aorist. It has to go by the rules. So it can't go off on its own, not powerful enough. That's the way I remember it. And this second aorist is a strong aorist. It goes against the rules. So it has some, it's like go, when, gone in English. It has its own rules. All right. So that's when you're second aorist. Now, luo is first aorist, so we can't use it for our illustration because it doesn't exist in that second aorist form because it's a weak verb. Does that make sense to everybody? So that's why we won't be using luo. We'll be using lambano. Yes. All right. And as far as the meaning of them, they still have the same basic meaning. There's no difference in the meaning as far as I can tell from all the sources that I've studied. So what we have is we have secondary endings. Now, I want to emphasize this. We have lambano. We're going to use lambano here as one of our forms. Lambano right here. And here's lampsomai. That's the future form of it. Elabon is aorist. Okay. That's our form, elabon. And so here, right down here is elabon. That's from lambano. Notice the mu got dropped off, didn't it? Okay. And so it takes a little bit different form. Conjugation is exactly like the imperfect tense. So it's like the imperfect tense, except for the stem. So if we go back to the imperfect tense that we've already covered, I believe. I think we have covered it. And so you're going to look at it, it's going to have the same ending as your imperfect tense. Now, I want to go into another file. I'm going to get out of this file right now. And we're going to get out of it, and I'll come back into it in a minute. I'm going to get out of it. And I'm going to go to another file. And the file I'm going to get is information for students. Now, I've sent you that file. We'll start sharing it. And right here, can you see that verb paradigms? Hopefully you can see it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Notice the imperfect over here. Imperfect. And then notice the endings on the aorist. Now, there is a change in the stem, of course, but right here, the omicron nu, and omicron nu over here, epsilon, sigma, and so forth. See, the forms of them are exactly the same, right? So that's what he's telling you there. I went ahead and just printed this out. It's just easier to use it that way. Because it's got all these forms in it. And we also will be, I think we'll be looking at our middle form for it too. You notice it's labon, it's the same word that we have in Robert's grammar here. And then the second aorist, we have a different word down here we're going to use right here for the second aorist. And so this is your second aorist, and this is second aorist middle. This is middle voice down here. And then we have second aorist passive voice. Now remember, in the aorist tense, the middle and passive have different forms. So kind of remember that. Forms are different in both the middle and in the aorist and in the future. Middle and the aorist are the same. middle and passive are different, I'm sorry, in the aorist in the future. Well, are there questions about this? I want to stop sharing that. Back to our original file. And we'll come back to it now. Hopefully you got it back up now. Is that correct?
I don't see it.
You don't see it?
No.
Let's see if we see it now. Can you see it now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. All right. Right here, it's like the imperfect tense, except for the stem. Now, that's the difference. That's how you can tell the imperfect from the aorist, second aorist. The stem is going to be different. Okay. The augment and the secondary endings are used. Okay. So right here, lambano, and this word means to receive or take. And it's found a number of times in the New Testament. So receive or take. And I would argue my argument for it is, if it's taking, that sounds like it's active voice or maybe middle. So I would argue that the idea of translating it to take would only go with the active or the middle voices. And the idea of receiving would tend to go with the passive voice. Mine could go with the middle voice to receive for yourself, but I think it's taking makes more sense to go with active and middle and to receive. The lexicons will give a gloss, and a gloss, I'll write the word out there. A gloss that basically is just a fill-in word that you can replace that word with. That's its basic meaning. And the gloss will be to take or receive. We can find lambano in the book somewhere, but that's what you're going to find, and that's what Thayer will basically call it. Lexicons will call it a take or receive.
So in your knowledge, when you see that, if it's in the middle, is that more of a taking or a receiving?
It's probably taking because it's a self-prompted. That would distinguish it from the passive voice. I think the passive voice is when it ought to be translated as to receive, right? But it's the self-prompted taking. We have another word, decomai, and I'll make it, put it in Greek for us. That'll be a symbol font, decomai, and this is to welcome, but to take something was welcome, or to receive it was welcome. And so to receive something was a welcoming idea, whereas lambano is a self-prompted taking. That's what the authorities tell us, okay? That's all in those notes that I gave you on called Greek grammar and lexicon notes. Greek grammar, I think it may be lexicon and grammar notes. I'm not sure how I titled it, but I sent you that file. But that's what I'm talking about there. Those are the two words that are contrasted as synonyms. And that's a very useful thing to, and sometimes it will help you to see what's being said, because decomai is more of a welcoming reception, whereas lambano is a self-prompted taking or receiving. Okay. That makes sense? Any questions? Okay, lambano. Elabon, elabase, elabe, elabomen, elabete, elabon. Now I want you to notice something here, and I think it's significant. I want you to look at this. Elabon, elabon. first person singular and third person plural have exactly the same form. That clear? That can be a problem. Usually the context will tell you which it is, but it could be a situation where it might not. Okay? So that makes it open to two possible interpretations. And if I found a verse where it was in that form and I couldn't tell from the context, then I would give it as what the best shot I had if I were making my translation, but I'd footnote it and I'd give the other option so that the readers, if I had my own translation and was giving it to someone, so that they know that that's a possible interpretation. And it's up to them to interpret it for themselves. I don't think a translator ought to tell what people interpret the Bible for the people. I think he ought to show it, translate it as to what it says, not what it means. There's a big difference in translating it to what it says and to what it means. Now, it means what it says, and I know that, someone will say, but sometimes it may have more than one option. I hope that's clear, but what I'm saying is, if you have my book on work of the Holy Spirit, Volume 2, I talk about in some detail translation and my views of what it ought to do. Some of the modern speech translations translate the meaning of the verse rather than what the verse says. And I think that's dangerous. I don't want some denominational person to tell me what the scriptures mean. I want to know what they say, and then I'll interpret for myself. And I'm responsible for the proper interpretation. Okay, I've done enough preaching. Any other questions or comments? Labaine always has a circumflex accent. It always has that circumflex. Now, we have the middle form of it, and of course, elabomain, and elabu, elabeto, elabomathar, elabaste, elabonto, abeste. Why is there an augment on the infinitive? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because an infinitive isn't a function of time. Doesn't have time in it. The time is determined by the context. It's the kind of action. So your infinitive won't have the augment tells you it's past tense. That's all it tells you. So you won't have one there. Now, there'd be a difference in your two infinitives, and I probably ought to go back to that other one to let you see it. We have the infinitive forms, and I should probably go back to that other file. But if you look at that other file, we have a circumflex on the epsilon, on the iota, and we don't have it on the present tense, the accent is on the upsilon, the vein. Let me go back and I'll show you. This can be a little bit tricky. If you're not careful, you'll miss it. All right, stop sharing. We'll get out of it. And we'll start sharing. And we'll come back. Information for students. Now, what I'm showing, I'm trying to get you to see right here. Epsilon iota nu, that's the ending of a present infinitive, present tense infinitive. And epsilon iota nu is the ending for the aorist, second aorist infinitive. So here's the difference. We don't have an accent mark on the iota here in the present, but we do have a circumflex on the iota. That's always going to have a circumflex. So the iota will also always be circumflexed in the second aorist infinitive, but it'll never be circumflexed in the present infinitive. See the difference? That's kind of tricky. That's what I'm saying. You need to be aware of that. So that you could get caught up in that. You see that and think that's present tense, present infinitive, but that's aorist and that's present. Same the last three letters, but the accent marks are different. Does that help? Everyone okay with that? Any questions? All right. Your middle, notice your middle as well. Okay. S thigh and S thigh. But again, your accent marks are different. Now the accent's right here on this one, and it's on the epsilon here. It'll always be on the epsilon on this one. All right. So that's how that works. All right. Any question? Middle passive and present are the same, okay? But they're different in the aorist and the future as well. Now we don't have a future infinitive. Well, we don't because it accomplished the same result as the aorist infinitive. So we do the same thing as aorist infinitive. So you don't have present, aorist, and first, second aorist, and we have a perfect infinitive. That's all the infinitives we have. So we'll come to those later. Are there questions? So just you have that table, that little chart there, and you compare them. That's why I put them in for you. Okay. All right. All right, back to that. And we got Roberts back up now for you? Everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I just wanted to point all that out so you wouldn't get lost in that. So that's why he tells you it always has the circumflex accent, but it will never have the circumflex accent in the present tense. Present infinitive will never have it. Okay. Okay. I took for myself, we come down here middle for Labano, I took for myself. Notice he's translating it as like taking instead of receiving, right? The middle voice. And we have Omain with epsilon, elobone, elobomain, elabu, elobeto. We already went through those, didn't we? Okay. Right. So it's I took for myself, you took for yourself, he, she, or it took for himself or itself. We took for ourselves, you all, plural, took for yourselves, and they took for themselves. And this is to take for yourself. To take for yourself. That would be how that would be translated. I've thought about adding that on out here as an explanation, to take for yourself. Any questions? Okay. The second aorist has no augment. Same endings. Let's go back here. The same endings are used as in the present infinitive. That's your aorist infinitive. Second aorist infinitive. But the accent's not recessive. It's always circumflex. S thigh is always accented on the penult on the second aorist stem. See, the antepenult, the ultima is the last syllable. The penult is the second to the last. Antepenult, ante is before. A-N-T-E, that's Latin. So this will be the next to the last syllable. That's what the penult is. I'm just reviewing. I'm sure you remember that. I just thought I'd point it out again. All right. So that's what I was trying to show you there with regard to that. That's this section 159. The passive differs from the middle and is built on a different stem. It'll be given later in section 203, so we'll have several more lessons before we get into aorist passive. All right. The second aorist in meaning is no different than the first aorist. The only difference is it's form. It's merely formed differently. So don't look for it to be different in meaning. It's just different in form. So the aorist still has the same meaning as the aorist. Right? The weak and the first and second aorist are in meaning are the same. They're just different forms. The first aorist endings, alpha, alpha, sigma, epsilon, amen, ate, on, and so forth, are sometimes found on second aorist stems. This is especially true for Lego. Now, Lego is I speak, and the stem of it is epsilon iota pi. And I've never figured out how that came about unless it was different dialects of Greek, and I picked up different words from different dialects. That's the best I can come up with for it. Right? So ipone is I spoke. I spoke. It's actually a form of Lego. It's like our go went gone, and I'm sure that confuses people that come in to study English, and that's their second language. Right? Or ipa. And so sometimes it will be in this form, but usually you'll see it as ipone. Right? Carefully, as in English, there's no way to determine what kind of aorist stem is a given verb will take. Let's learn the principal parts of the verbs. So we're going to have vocabulary now. Some of the most common verbs taking second aorist are in this vocabulary. And what he's showing us here is we got the word bottle, I throw, and then I throw, and then a ballon. Now notice it doesn't have double lambda, it just has a single lambda. So the stem is ball, beta, alpha, lambda. That's your stem. And the infinitive then takes that stem and puts an epsilon iota nu on it. So that's your second aorist stem. So the stem is actually going to be different. Right? So that's your stem. Enomai, I become or happen to take place. And so the stem is gamma epsilon nu. And so there's your stem. Your augment goes in front of it, and then oh my. Right? And we can take our basic stem and put esthi, and that becomes an infinitive. So we'd have to know its stem. I think what I've done in all of in that file that I've sent you, I think I've got all of these into the file with the words. And so I think if you go to these words, you'll find these stems in these laid out for you there. Okay. Erchomai, it takes a variant form, becomes aothone. Aothone, that's your second aorist. And so it doesn't even look like. It's like go in, gone. They don't even look like go in. They don't even look like in English. Your stem is elth, epsilon, lambda, theta, and there's your basic stem. And then they add the epsilon iota nu with the circumflex to make it an infinitive. So you have to know what that stem is. Now, one of the things you want to do is get your stems as much as you can. When you find some book that will give you the stems, you probably ought to put them in a file somewhere. And what I'm trying to do is take this file that I've given you to put the stems on it, and so that they'll be right there with you. And they'll be very helpful. I'm trying to do that. And as I go through, from time to time, I go through. I think I've been through this and put all these on there. and so if I have, then it's already there for you to use. Estelle is I eat. And the form of it in the second, in the aorist is efagon. And fog is the stem. That stem doesn't look anything like Estelle over here. If you look at it. And again, it's like our go and went. There's your augment, epsilon, there's your stem, omicron nu, singular. This is first person singular form. And so we take our basic stem, fog, and now that becomes our infinitive. Again, to eat. Okay? Any questions? All right. To consume, they put kata in front of this. Kata, kadesel, they drop the alpha. Kadesel, and that becomes to consume. Literally, it means to eat it down. And Lexicon's even there writes it as eat it up. And that's not literally the meaning of it, because it's to eat it down. So they viewed the food as going down, and we have it going up. I think of forking it in with a spoon or a fork into your mouth, raising it up to your mouth. That's the way I think we eat it up. But the Greeks would say eat it down. Eurisco, I find, and so here's your stem. Now that's pretty good, your stem over here. You see your stem there in it. So that's not too bad. But we lose part of this other stuff that dropped off. So it looks a little bit like it. Okay. That one's not too bad. Echo, I find escone, and that's aorist. And sky, and that's your stem. Okay. Okay. And when we get here, that will be your I'm looking at that just does not look right. This is supposed to be a sigma. That is a mistake in the book, and it wasn't right. And I've got that fixed. Okay. That is a mistake. Save it. All right. Any question? So now we can see our stem there. Hadn't noticed that. And so that's what it is. And then lambano, I take, or I receive if it's passive. Elabon, and lab is your stem. There's your stem, and the on ending and the augment. And then we take and drop the, that won't come off. I don't know what's going on there. Okay. And so that would be a vein. Lego, I took. iPhone is completely different. So it doesn't even look like it. I is your stem. And so we take our basic stem and then put epsilon iota nu on it. All right? Horao, I see. I don't. And I'm satisfied they come from a different word. And probably different dialects had different words for seeing. And id is your stem. There's your stem, id, and on, epsilon. And there's your stem, and there's your infinitive. Once you got the stem, you can produce your infinitive. Pharaoh, I always remember that word, I bear. So Pharaoh made the children of Israel bear burdens. That's how I remembered that word when I first studied Greek. And now our stem here is, again, a inagig. And so this epsilon gets augmented to an eta. And so we have that, and alpha is your ending for it. All right. And now there's your stem, and you can see how you make your infinitive. Any questions? So these are some words that are fairly important. I will check, but I'm pretty sure I have all of those in that file. If I don't, I'll send you the file later, okay? Tonight, I'll check through and make sure they're all in there. I'm pretty sure I got them all in there as the basic stems. Arithmos, our word arithmetic comes from this, arithmos, and that is number. That's the word for a number. And eulogeo, and our English word eulogy comes from this. The U prefix is good, and this is from basically probably derived from basic root from Lego, but logeo from like logos, from the same basic idea of saying something good. I will bless. The atribo, and that's the terrier pastime, right? Desmios is a prisoner. If you study these, there's two kinds of prisoners in the New Testament. There's a prisoner that's a common criminal, and there's a prisoner of war. And the Apostle Paul calls himself a prisoner, but it's a prisoner of war. And so, of course, you should view we're at war with Satan, and of course, it's not carnal warfare, but it's a spiritual battle between ideas and concepts, and we're trying to win the minds of people. Okay? Cosmos, and our word cosmos, and a cosmonaut was a Russian word, and they probably got it from the Greek language, which came into the land of Russia. The Slavic people got a lot of the structure of their language, at least Russian, and I understand Ukrainian's pretty much like Russian, that it got it from the Greek-speaking people, probably that brought the gospel to them. Cosmos, and our word cosmetic comes from it, how something is arranged. Osarion, that's a fish, but it's cooked, or tidbits of a fish, usually like a cooked fish, right? Are there questions?
Yeah, you said there's two words for prisoner. Which one is this one?
I think this is a common prisoner.
This is the common one? Okay.
Let's look it up in my file. I think I've got the file over there. We got time to look it up. And I'd like to go to one passage with you. I didn't have it open. All right. I'm going to go in now to the Greek lexicon grammar notes. Desmios. All right. Can you see the lexicon?
Uh-huh.
Yes, sir.
All right. Benjamin, are you seeing it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'm going to go to search, Control H, and I'll get delta. Down to delta. It's got nearly 420 pages. So let's go by go alphabetically. Desmios, Pro Sigma, Desmios. A captive, a prisoner. Okay, that's not one taken by spear. Okay. I'm gonna do a search for spear. That's probably this one right here. Yeah, I think this is a fellow prisoner and a fellow captive. And Thayer tells us it's someone taken with a spear. And so this is a word for a prisoner of war, not a common criminal. Here's your different word. Does that help? This word here is a shortened form of it. And so that's the word that I'm looking at. Let me find, I may have more on this word just in a minute. I did. Search for it. There it is. Here it is. This is Thayer's definition. I probably ought to add some more in there. But Paul is a fellow prisoner, and he had the word fellow prisoner also with this word and then a preposition attached to it, fellow. And I think it's soon, or maybe it may become a move soon. And that's a fellow prisoner. And that's a prisoner of war. Okay, taken by the spear. Right? And that would indicate that it's a battle or a warfare. So it's a prisoner of war. Yep. Right. I want you to, if you have just a moment, I want you to go to Luke 22 with me, and I want you to see something here. When Jesus is praying, Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. And two different words for will here. And one of them is the inclination we have. So Jesus is saying, not my inclination, probably his human part. I did not want to go through the pain, but he was going to overcome it. And the second word, but thy will, is a thought out will or a plan, something that has been planned and thought out. So there's a subtle difference, and it's from two words, and I'll write them out here. So right here is the two words that little might change into uppercase, but I'll just leave it that way. All right. So this will be a lowercase beta. Little my and fellow, these are two verb forms. You can look those two words up and see it. And this file has information on them, the differences between them. So there's a play on words that we don't see in our English translation, but the Greek really is helpful. And we see that Jesus is saying, not how I'm inclined and whatever, but my probably his body of flesh and the human side of him just did not want to go through all that pain that he was going to endure. He knew what was going to happen. But he was willing to submit to the plans of God, the arranged plans, the thought out will of God. Does that make sense?
You're saying Jesus had two different personages?
No, I'm saying that Jesus is both human and divine. And we know that. And I think that the human part, and I'm not necessarily two persons, but and I don't know how he became both human and divine. But I think he was just one person. But I think there was the human part of him that did not want to endure that pain. That's the way I interpret that. Okay.
Have you ever read Maurice Barnett's take on that?
I'm not sure. I have 2 or 3 of his books. Okay. You have his paper on it?
Yeah, I've got his books on it. He's got 2 book series on it. His take is, I tend to agree with him, that Jesus is wishing away the condition of the garden itself, not the cross.
Okay.
The reason being, if you look in Luke's account, the angel comes to restore him.
Yeah.
And so he has sweat drops of blood, as of blood, et cetera, et cetera. And so if an angel was required to come restore him, then he's asking for that cup to go away.
Okay.
The anguish he's feeling in the garden.
Well, that's possible. But the point is, there are 2 different Greek words there for the will. One of them is how you're inclined, and the other one is the thought out will or planned will. And he was going to submit to he wanted the planned will of God to have sway. And it could very easily be what was happening in the garden. I would not rule that out. Okay. But my point was that these 2 words are there. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And I think they're both in noun form, but you just take the noun form of the words. I just want to point that out. That's something that's food for study. Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking about that in relation to John 6:38.
Maurice was a good thinker, so anyhow, I knew him well. Okay, pretty well.
Yeah, I was thinking what you're saying in regard to John 6:38. There he says, "For I've come down from heaven, not that I should do the will of me, but the will of the one who sent me."
Yes.
And in that case, it does use thelema, or both of those cases.
So fits in there pretty well, doesn't it? Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I just wanted to point that out. You run into those 2 words. Sometimes we don't. Our English text doesn't make stuff clear for us. There has to be some kind of distinction. These use 2 different words. I know they're both translated well, but they have a difference in meaning. Okay. Okay, I want to call a halt to it. Let me get out of that. Stop sharing. And I want to stop recording.